Before we begin, if you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps more than you know, and it tells the algorithm that you enjoy deep dive HFY stories just like this one. Now settle in. Section 1 begins. Rylan Ward stepped off the transport ramp with the unhurried confidence of a man who'd walked into danger enough times to stop fearing the shape of it. The Galactic Council chamber stretched before him in a sweep of polished stone and holographic banners, each representing a world older and supposedly wiser than Earth. Delegates watched him like he was a stray animal that had somehow wandered onto sacred ground. Their gazes sharpened when the heavy rhythmic thuds from the docking corridor echoed behind him. The beast was coming. Rylan didn't turn. He didn't need to. Every step the creature took vibrated through the floor plates, a deep, trembling pulse that made even fortified metal complain. Gasps rippled through the chamber, followed quickly by arguments whispered in fear. A dozen translators struggled to keep up with panicked speculation. Humans claim they captured it. Impossible. Nothing survives it. Why bring it here? Are they trying to threaten us? Rylan let their assumptions swirl. Better to let them reveal their ignorance now than later. He stood still, hands clasped behind his back, jaw set in its usual shape of restrained patience. His uniform carried no decorations. Humans didn't need glitter to prove capability. The chamber doors groaned open. Light washed across the council floor as the containment detail rolled in a towering figure wrapped in reinforced alloy chains. The creature known across 5 sectors as Vorkal, the Apex. The Devourer. The last thing entire civilizations ever saw. Even weakened, it loomed like a nightmare given muscle and breath. Each movement strained the mechanisms bolted around its limbs, though the beast didn't try to break free. It only scanned the room with cold, ancient eyes carved from some predatory instinct Earth had no evolutionary equivalent for. Delegates recoiled. A few shields activated reflexively, shimmering like trembling glass. Rylan finally turned. Vorkal's gaze locked on him. The shift in the chamber was immediate. Some delegates flinched as though the creature's attention might burn them by proximity. Others whispered about dominance displays and predatory fixation. The assumption crystallized fast. The beast hated him. Rylan didn't react. The creature wasn't looking at him with hatred, and he suspected several species here lacked the emotional vocabulary to distinguish intimidation from recognition. He watched the subtle contraction of Vorkal's pupils, the micro-tilt of its head. If anything, the apex looked relieved. The council speaker, a thin, translucent being whose form wavered like smoke trapped inside glass, rose from its podium. "Human representative," it said, voice echoing through layered translation fields. "You arrive bearing a creature responsible for the extinction of 32 colonies. We demand an explanation." Rylan stepped forward, boots clicking with deliberate calm. "Earth believes the council deserves the truth," he said. A crackle of disbelief hissed across the seething tiers. Truth was rarely a gift in this place. More often it was a weapon. The speaker gestured at the chained colossus. "You expect us to believe this monster fell under human control? Humans struggle to control their own gravity wells. This is absurd." One delegate barked. "What method did you use? Neural straps? Genetic suppression? Chemical restraints? Speak plainly." Vorkal's talons scraped against the floor, a low warning rumble vibrating through the chamber like distant thunder. The counselors fell silent immediately. The rumble stopped the moment their voices died. Rylan didn't smile, but he felt the moment for what it was, the apex intervening on his behalf. And still the delegates misunderstood. "It reacts to your authority," one hissed. "It fears punishment." "Humans must have broken it," another declared. Rylan felt a flicker of irritation, a rare emotion for him. "With respect," he said, voice steady, "you're making assumptions without evidence." A tall, armored representative from the Drask Dominion slammed a fist into its podium. "Assumptions? Humans brought the most dangerous organism in known space into our chamber. What else do we call it but a prisoner?" Rylan stepped aside so they could see the creature more clearly. Vorkal towered silently, gaze fixed on Rylan, waiting. Always waiting. The chains around its arms glimmered with lacrunic symbols, but Rylan knew every one of those runes was decorative. The locks weren't even latched. Not that anyone else here needed to know that yet. "Earth does not claim mastery over Vorkal," Rylan said. "We are not its captors." The speaker's glow dimmed in confusion. "Then, why is it here? Why does it follow your steps? Why does it watch only you?" Rylan held the speaker's flickering gaze. "Because it wants to be." A stunned silence swept across the chamber, disbelief locking every delegate into rigid stillness. Not a whisper escaped them. Even the automated recorders paused, interpreting the moment as a potential threat. The apex tilted its massive head, chains clinking gently, and released a low, rumbling breath that felt almost like acknowledgement, an impossible thing from a creature engineered by nature to rule without mercy. The speaker's voice wavered for the first time. "Explain, human." Rylan inhaled slowly. He had anticipated this confrontation, rehearsed the clarity with which he'd deliver the truth, but now that the moment arrived, the weight of it settled on him like an old memory clawing up from cold earth. "Your assumption," he said carefully, "is that humanity subdued the creature. But Earth does not subdue what it does not understand. We found Vorkal dying. We gave aid. We offered shelter. And it chose not to harm us." Laughter erupted in several languages, harsh, disbelieving, mocking. "No creature chooses mercy. No one chooses humans." Rylan let them taunt until the sound scraped thin. Then he spoke again, softer, but with the authority of truth sharpened by experience. "Vorkal was never Earth's prisoner." He let the words hang, heavy enough to pull silence back into the chamber. "Then what was it?" a delegate demanded. Rylan exhaled. The truth settled on him like a memory of snow and blood and a sky torn open by crash fire. He met Vorkal's gaze again, steady, unblinking, waiting for him to speak what belonged to both of them. "A guest," Rylan said. For a moment, the entire council chamber felt as though it were balancing on a single breath, suspended between fear and revelation. Vorkal bowed its head. Gasps exploded around the chamber, but Rylan didn't look away. This was the moment the council needed, even if they didn't understand why yet. They would. And when they did, the galaxy would never see humans the same way again. Rylan remembered the day the sky tore open above Alaska, a jagged wound of burning metal and failing engines streaking across the twilight like a falling star that had forgotten how to die quietly. The research station shuddered as the crash shook the valley, scattering birds into frantic spirals and sending a plume of snow rising like a ghost from the treeline. He was already moving before the alarm started screaming, sprinting into the biting cold with a rescue team scrambling to keep up. Whatever had come down wasn't human, and that alone was enough to trigger every protocol designed for planetary threats. The wreckage smoldered at the base of a ravine, a twisted skeleton of alien alloys hissing steam into the frozen air. Rylan approached with measured caution, rifle lowered but ready. Something enormous had clawed its way out of the shattered hull, leaving deep gouges and molten footprints in the snow. Blood, thick, iridescent, unnaturally warm, dripped onto the ground in slow, deliberate beats. The creature was struggling to crawl away, muscles trembling, breath a ragged rattle. Rylan stopped 10 meters short. The thing was colossal, far larger than anything Earth's fauna had ever produced. Its armored hide quivered with pain, and its elongated limbs flexed as though ready to lash out despite its weakened state. But what held Rylan's attention wasn't its size, it was the way it flinched when he spoke. Not in aggression. In fear. "We're here to help," he said quietly, knowing full well the words might be useless. "If you can understand me, stay still." Behind him, medics whispered urgent warnings. The creature could crush a truck. It could tear humans apart before anyone could react. Every military instinct should have pushed him to neutralize it. But the thing was bleeding out and its movements lacked hostility. It was fighting for life, not dominance. Rylan holstered his weapon. "Prepare a brace and thermal wraps," he ordered. "And get the scanner running." The medics hesitated, rightfully so. He didn't blame them. But Rylan stepped closer until he could feel the heat pulsing off the creature's wounds. Its eyes, pupil slit and luminous, fixed on him with an intensity that made his pulse hammer. He crouched within striking distance, ignoring every survival warning his brain threw at him. "You're hurt," Rylan said. "Let me help you." The creature's breath shuddered, a low, rattling exhale that sent a tremor through the snow. Slowly, agonizingly, it lowered its head, exposing the jagged wound along its neck. Submission. A gesture no apex predator on Earth would ever make to a human. The team sprang into motion. They applied pressure seals to the largest gashes, wrapped its torso in adaptive thermal fabric, and used portable stabilizers to slow internal hemorrhaging. The creature watched Rylan throughout the entire process, as though his presence alone anchored it to consciousness. Hours later, inside the reinforced medical hangar, Rylan sat beside the alien as it drifted in and out of awareness. Its breathing remained ragged, but each cycle grew slightly steadier. The creature's physiology adapted rapidly, healing with fierce determination. Even sedated, It twitched in frustration at its own weakness. He didn't blame it. Power scaled across species, but vulnerability felt the same for all living things. "Why did you run?" Rylan murmured, studying the fracture lines across its armor like plates. They weren't from the crash. They were from weapons. Sophisticated ones. Someone had hunted this creature long before it reached Earth. A clawed hand shifted weakly, scraping against the floor. Its muscles contracted in a slow, deliberate pattern. Not a threat. An attempt at communication. Rylan leaned closer. The creature's throat released a low, broken sound that barely qualified as speech. "Hunt, stopped here." Rylan felt a chill that had nothing to do with Alaska. Whatever was chasing it hadn't just wanted it killed. They wanted it recaptured. Used. Weaponized. Over the next days, as its condition stabilized, the creature's behavior shifted. At first it watched everyone with the suspicion of something accustomed to betrayal. But humans didn't treat it like a monster to be caged. They fed it warm meat, kept the lights dim to ease sensory strain, and worked in quiet routines to signal predictability. The creature responded to consistency the way some animals responded to gentleness. Slowly, cautiously, but undeniably. Rylan was the first person it allowed within arm's reach without tension. He spent hours in the hangar, reading reports, monitoring its vitals and talking, not because he expected comprehension, but because even apex creatures needed to hear a steady voice when trapped in unfamiliar territory. By the fourth day, the predator, because that's what the whispered briefings had begun calling it, showed preference. It tracked Rylan's movements with patient focus. It calmed when he approached. It tensed when others did. One evening, during a routine feeding, the predator lifted its head and held out a portion of its food toward him. A sharing gesture. Primitive in concept, but profound in meaning. Rylan didn't take it. He had no desire to insult it, but he bowed his head slightly. The predator rumbled approval, a sound that vibrated deep in its chest. It was trust. But trust wasn't safety. Not for the creature and not for Earth. Satellite scans confirmed unidentified ships in distant orbit, moving with patterns too deliberate to be natural phenomena. The hunters had found their trail again. Rylan stood by the predator's bedside that night, watching its slow, measured breathing. "They're coming for you," he said softly. "And they won't care who gets in their way." The creature's eyes opened, reflecting the dim hangar lights like molten metal catching fire. It looked at him, not with fear this time, but with a resolve that felt ancient. "Hunt, end," it rasped. It wasn't a plea. It was a promise. Rylan understood then that this being had survived horrors no human could imagine, and yet it had chosen, deliberately, to let humans near. That meant something. Something bigger than Earth. Bigger than the Council. Bigger than the fractured politics of species who thought themselves masters of the galaxy. The creature would not run again. And neither would Rylan. Outside, the orbital alarms began to whisper warnings. Just faint enough that the medics ignored them, just sharp enough that Rylan felt the hairs on his arms rise. The hunters had arrived. And the galaxy was about to learn what a human and a wounded apex could become when forced to stand together. The council chamber felt smaller than it had an hour earlier, as though the presence of the apex compressed every atom of air into something heavier, denser, and far more suffocating. Vorkal stood in the center of the room, still bound in ceremonial chains, though everyone now sensed those restraints were merely symbolic. The beast wasn't contained, it was choosing not to move. Its patience unsettled the delegates more than violence ever could. Rylan stood a step to its right, posture calm but sharp with readiness. He didn't trust the council to react rationally. Their fear radiated across the room in palpable waves, each species expressing it differently, twitching antennae, feathers bristling, bioluminescence flickering like stuttering heartbeats. Every eye darted between the human and the apex, trying to decide which was more dangerous. The speaker finally broke the silence. "Human representative, you imply that this creature accepted your aid willingly. That it was not coerced. That it now follows you by choice." Rylan nodded once. "Correct." A murmur rose, disbelieving and sharp. A delegate with plates of gleaming silver across its shoulders leaned forward. "Then explain its behavior now. It watches you constantly. It reacts to your slightest movement. Its posture suggests subordination." Vorkal released a low sound, not quite a growl, not fully speech, a vibration that rolled like thunder through the floor. Rylan lifted a hand slightly, and the creature quieted immediately. The reaction sent a tremor of unease through the chamber. "You see," the plated delegate insisted. "Obedience." Rylan shook his head. "Trust." Another counselor scoffed. Creatures like that do not trust. They dominate. Or they die, someone added. Rylan stepped forward. You know Vorkal only as a weapon. A legend. A force. But you do not understand the distinction between domination and choice. It cooperated during transport. It allowed the chains. It entered this chamber without resistance. All of that was its decision. Decisions are made by those with freedom, the speaker said. And we see no freedom in its posture. Vorkal suddenly shifted, the motion so fluid and controlled that half the council drew back in alarm. The chains rattled, then stilled. The apex lowered itself until one knee touched the floor, head bowing. A deliberate gesture. A declaration. The speaker's glow flickered in shock. What is it doing? Rylan answered quietly. Showing respect. Toward you? A counselor whispered, horrified. Yes. The silence that followed felt like a held breath, long, brittle, capable of shattering. Rylan drew in air slowly. The truth that had been crouching behind the council's assumptions was ready to step into the light, whether they could handle it or not. Vorkal was hunted across half the galaxy. Wounded to the brink of death. When it reached Earth, we didn't chain it. We didn't torture it. We didn't weaponize it. We treated it as a living being in need of help. And it simply accepted this? Another delegate snapped. It did not attempt to kill you? Rylan's expression didn't shift. It could have. Many times. A flicker of memory flashed, Vorkal rising in the night, disoriented and in pain. The ceiling lights had flickered. The beast had lashed out. But Rylan had stepped forward, speaking calmly, refusing to meet force with fear. The apex had frozen mid-lunge, choosing restraint. Choosing not to harm. He didn't describe the moment aloud. The council didn't need the full vulnerability of that night. They needed understanding, not spectacle. A representative of the Drask Dominion clicked its mandibles. Your world displays a reckless disregard for survival. Perhaps that foolishness is mistaken for courage. Rylan met its gaze without flinching. Humans aren't reckless. We're adaptive. We consider risk worth taking when the outcome matters. Survival isn't just about living, it's about what you become while doing it. The counselor recoiled, unsettled not by the words, but by the certainty behind them. The speaker leaned forward, translucent eyes narrowing. Explain then. Why does this creature defer to you? Why does the most feared predator in the known regions bow to a human soldier from a young, insignificant world? A sharp, ringing quiet filled the chamber. Rylan spoke slowly, each word deliberate. Because we didn't treat it as prey. Or as a trophy. Or as a tool. We treated it with dignity. Something it had never been offered. Vorkal lifted its head slightly, eyes burning like twin suns behind smoked glass. It didn't speak, not yet, but its stillness carried intent, a shared truth bridging species. The speaker absorbed Rylan's explanation with the uneasy patience of someone trying to solve a puzzle whose pieces felt fundamentally wrong. So you claim that the creature's current allegiance is voluntary? Yes. And what of the hunters who tracked it to your world? They didn't expect to face humans, Rylan replied. They expected Earth to cower. Instead, they found people who don't bend when threatened. A tremor of fear and fascination rippled around the chamber. The plated delegate leaned forward. If this apex stays with your people, you understand what this means for galactic balance. I do, Rylan said. And so does Vorkal. All eyes turned to the predator. For the first time since entering the chamber, it rose fully to its towering height. The air vibrated as it released a low, resonant utterance, one that shook the banners and rattled the council desks. A single word emerged from the rumble, shaped by intention rather than fluency. Choice. The chamber froze. Rylan felt the gravity of the moment settle around them. A creature that had been branded as nothing more than a biological catastrophe had spoken its truth in front of the galaxy's most powerful rulers. Not with violence. Not with terror. But with a declaration that upended everything they believed. The speaker's glow dimmed, then steadied. Human representative, it said quietly, your world may have altered something fundamental. We must consider what this means. Rylan inclined his head, but inside, tension coiled tight. The council was shifting, from fear to suspicion, from dismissal to recognition. And recognition could be dangerous. He felt Vorkal's presence at his side, the subtle hum of breath and restrained power. Whatever decision the council made next, the room was no longer balanced on politics or protocol. It was balanced on the bond between a human and the galaxy's most feared predator. And somewhere deep in the structure of this chamber, an alert tone began to pulse, soft, nearly inaudible, but unmistakable to anyone who'd ever heard the warning before an approaching threat. The alert tone barely rose above a whisper, yet it sliced through the chamber like a blade dipped in ice. Delegates stiffened, their instinctive fear momentarily redirected from the apex to the invisible threat approaching from beyond the station's shields. Rylan felt the shift in atmosphere before any alarms escalated. Vorkal felt it too. The creature's entire frame tightened, muscles rippling beneath its plated hide, chains clinking as though warning the room to stay back. The speaker flickered in alarm. Unidentified vessels approaching. Multiple signatures. Trajectories, predatory. Its glow dimmed further as new data streamed across the holographic displays. They are not responding to council hails. Rylan didn't need confirmation. He recognized the pattern immediately. The hunters had come. The very same who had wounded Vorkal, who had driven it across star systems like hounds chasing a prize they believed rightfully theirs. He'd watched their ships descend on Earth's orbit months earlier, relentless and silent. But now they had followed the apex here. The plated delegate's mandibles clicked in agitation. This chamber is not fortified to withstand an assault. They will attempt extraction. Extraction, Rylan repeated, voice edged with a growl. You mean capture? Again. They consider the apex a weapon, the delegate said. A prize. A resource. It hesitated, glancing warily at Vorkal. And they will not hesitate to fire. The chamber trembled as the station shifted to defensive posture. Barriers activated with shimmering waves that washed across the walls, but Rylan knew those wouldn't hold. Not against hunters who specialized in retrieving their quarry no matter the cost. Vorkal emitted a low rumble, eyes narrowing toward the outer corridors as though it could sense the enemy ships pressing closer. The council recoiled at the sound, but Rylan stepped toward the creature, keeping his voice calm. They're here for you, he said softly. But we're not letting them take you. Vorkal's head lowered, not in submission but in acknowledgement, a warrior accepting a truth it had long prepared for. Something in the chamber snapped then, panic, perhaps, or pride finally giving way to survival. The speaker turned to Rylan with a note of urgency. Human representative, if these hunters intend to breach our station, you must control your companion. Its presence alone will escalate conflict. It's not my job to control it, Rylan said. But it won't attack without cause. 'Cause we'll find it soon enough, a delegate whispered. The station jolted violently. Energy crackled across the barrier fields before the lights flickered. The hunters had begun their assault. Rylan felt the vibration through the soles of his boots. A boarding maneuver. Direct and efficient. Hunters wasted no time. Vorkal took one step forward, and all the chains draped over its body snapped like brittle twigs. Delegates shrieked, but the apex ignored them entirely. Its attention was focused on the corridor ahead, posture coiled with lethal intent. Yet it didn't move to flee. It moved to defend. Rylan stepped up beside it. Stay with me, he said. Vorkal's gaze flickered, an ancient fire aligning with human resolve. The chamber doors blew inward with a concussive shockwave. Smoke billowed through the entryway as armored figures emerged, sleek and predatory, their weapons glowing with volatile charge. Their helmets bore the insignia of a hunting clan notorious even among hostile species. Mercenaries who viewed the apex not as a living being but as the ultimate trophy. Their leader stepped forward, weapon aimed directly at Vorkal. Stand down, he commanded, voice a guttural snarl filtered through a modulator. The creature is ours. Rylan stepped into the line of fire without hesitation. Not anymore. The hunter's helmet tilted. You place yourself between prey and its rightful owners. Move aside, human. Rylan didn't move. Earth doesn't recognize your ownership. And Earth doesn't matter, the hunter growled. Vorkal moved then, one step, deliberate and thunderous. The hunters reacted instantly, weapons rising. The apex lifted a massive arm, placing it behind Rylan as though shielding him. The gesture froze the hunters in momentary confusion. The leader scoffed. You've corrupted it. No, Rylan said. We earned its loyalty. Weapons flared. The first shot fired. And Vorkal moved with a speed that defied logic. It lunged forward, shielding Rylan with its own body as the energy bolt seared across its armored hide. The apex struck the nearest hunter with a force that sent him crashing into the chamber wall, armor buckling. Chaos ignited. Delegates scattered, shields activating in desperation. Hunters surged into the room with ruthless efficiency, but they had not anticipated a human standing shoulder to shoulder with the most formidable predator in the galaxy. Rylan fought with precision, Small movements, ruthless intent, exploiting every weakness in the hunter's equipment. While Vorkal tore through attackers with terrifying grace, Rylan disarmed, redirected, and neutralized with a soldier's fluency. Their movements synced as though months of survival had carved instinct into muscle. A hunter lunged at Rylan from behind. Vorkal's tail lashed out, knocking the assailant aside. Another aimed at the apex's throat. Rylan intercepted the strike with a stolen blade, driving the attacker to the ground. The council watched, frozen between fear and awe. Two beings, one human, one monster, fighting with a unity that had no precedent in the galaxy. The hunters faltered. Their formation broke. Their leader realized the truth too late. "This is impossible," he snarled. "No creature aligns with humans." Vorkal rose to its full height, towering over the remaining attackers. Its eyes blazed as it stepped forward, voice emerging in a guttural, resonant growl that carried across the chamber. "Not creature," it said. "Clan." The leader's courage cracked. He staggered back as Vorkal closed in, but before the apex struck, Rylan raised a hand. "Let him leave." The hunters retreated, dragging their wounded. The leader glared at Rylan, hatred burning like acid. "This changes nothing," he spat. "You've rewritten the hunt, but the galaxy will not accept it." Vorkal rumbled a warning, but Rylan kept his gaze steady on the hunter. "It will have to." The boarding party fled. The chamber fell silent except for the fading echo of battle and the trembling breaths of stunned delegates. Rylan turned to Vorkal. "You all right?" The apex lowered its head until it nearly touched Rylan's shoulder, a gesture of unspoken promise. The speaker rose slowly, voice barely steady. "Human, what happens now?" Rylan looked around the chamber, aware of the shifting future closing in around them. "Now," he said, "the council decides whether it stands with us, or against what comes next." The chamber was quieter than it had ever been. Delegates moved with deliberate care, eyes wide, voices hushed. The battle had passed, yet the tension hung thicker than smoke from the recent skirmish. Every species present understood, in some deep, instinctive way, that what they had just witnessed defied the galaxy's rules. Vorkal stood near Rylan, towering, massive, still coiled with restrained power, but its posture spoke volumes. It was no longer a threat, and yet no one dared assume it was tamed. Its loyalty was voluntary, absolute, and terrifying. Rylan scanned the room, reading the subtle shifts in body language, the trembling mandibles, the faint glow fluctuations in bioluminescent delegates. They were debating, silently and loudly, how to reconcile their fear with this new reality. He knew what the council's verdict would be about Earth. They were capable of awe, but politics rarely moved so quickly to admiration. The speaker's form shimmered uncertainly. "Human representative, your species has acted in ways no protocol could anticipate. You have engaged an apex predator, survived, and commanded respect." Its tone trembled like ice cracking over deep water. "Explain your philosophy. Why does Earth behave in ways that defy expectation?" Rylan stepped forward, the weight of the room pressing on him, yet he carried himself as if standing on familiar soil. "Humans do not seek to dominate," he said. "We do not bind what we do not understand. We act not because it is easy but because it is necessary. We measure risk not in fear but in what is at stake. We offer trust where none has been given, and we act with loyalty once it is earned. That is not weakness. That is strength." The speaker seemed to process or struggle to process the statement. Vorkal shifted slightly, a sound of affirmation deep in its chest, resonant and vibrating. It stepped closer to Rylan, shoulders brushing, posture protective yet respectful. The apex's choice was clear. No chains, no threats, only a conscious bond formed through mutual understanding. The delegates could read fear in every twitching limb, every inhalation of stunned disbelief. A high-ranking member of the Drask Dominion spoke first, voice low, hesitant, edged with awe. "So it is not compelled. It remains, by choice." "Yes," Rylan replied. "And that choice reflects the nature of our species. Strength is not just power. Strength is knowing who earns it and who respects it." Whispers erupted across the chamber. Counselors debated furiously, some arguing the humans had disrupted galactic hierarchies, others recognizing a new paradigm. The presence of Vorkal, the apex predator whose name alone had caused entire civilizations to shiver, made clear that humans had earned more than fear, they had earned allegiance. Rylan's eyes met Vorkal's. In that instant they shared a memory deeper than speech. Snow and blood, fire and ice, survival and trust. They had survived hunters, the vacuum of space politics, and the galaxy's rigid hierarchy. Both had learned that strength was not measured by dominance but by choice. The speaker's voice returned, quieter now, hesitant but formal. The Council must consider Earth's status. The display of human fortitude and the voluntary allegiance of Vorkal demands recognition. How does your species propose we integrate this reality? Rylan considered the room, the weight of history pressing against him. Integration is simple. Respect the boundaries of trust. Understand that humans lead not by fear, but by example and action. Vorkal chooses to remain with us. That choice will define the relationship going forward, not coercion, not fear, not legend. And I will stand by it. A tremor ran through the room, subtle but unmistakable. Delegates, some grudgingly, began nodding. Others remained silent, unsure if admiration, fear, or envy colored their thoughts. The Council had witnessed something it had not anticipated. An apex predator willingly pledging loyalty to a human, and no threat, weapon, or political play could undermine that truth. Vorkal bent its massive head, brushing its jaw gently against Ryland's shoulder in a gesture that was equal parts respect, acknowledgement, and promise. Delegates froze, absorbing a ritual foreign to every known cultural protocol in their records. The apex had chosen a human as its partner, and that choice alone shifted balance across sectors. Ryland's mind raced, not with fear but calculation. The galaxy was watching, and every observer would need to reconcile that humans were not merely survivors. They were architects of trust and power combined. Vorkal's loyalty was absolute, not enforced. That was something no weapon, no fleet, no political maneuver could replicate. A distant alarm sounded, faint but distinct, echoing across the chamber's energy barriers. Hunters, scattered but persistent, still lingered in orbit, their presence a warning and a challenge. Ryland didn't flinch. Vorkal's presence at his side was enough to communicate confidence, to broadcast to the galaxy that the humans were no longer insignificant. The speaker's glow dimmed, then pulsed slowly, an attempt at finality. Earth shall be elevated to special status membership within the Council. The allegiance of Vorkal is recognized as voluntary and binding. Further aggression toward this species or its human companion shall be considered an act of war. A murmur of disbelief ran through the chamber. Some whispered of rebellion, others of unprecedented honor. Ryland's gaze stayed fixed on the apex. The creature rumbled softly, a low vibration carrying warmth and approval. "Let's make it clear," Ryland said, voice calm but sharp, cutting through the Council's whispers. "This alliance is not about conquest. It's about choice. It's about respect. And anyone who forgets that will learn too late that humans honor their bonds." Vorkal shifted, massive claws clicking against the polished floor. It lowered its head again, brushing Ryland's arm, then straightened fully, towering over the chamber. Its eyes glimmered like molten metal, unwavering, resonant. "Choice," it said again, stronger this time. "Loyalty. Honor. Shared path." The chamber fell into a hush, the words carrying across every consciousness present. Even the speaker's glow seemed to shimmer in acknowledgement. No one doubted the reality. Humans had survived, adapted, and earned allegiance where others had only sought submission. Ryland placed a hand on Vorkal's massive forearm, feeling the subtle tremor of life and power beneath. "The galaxy will learn," he said softly, "that humans don't take prisoners. We make allies." A collective shiver ran through the chamber, not of fear but of revelation. Every species, every delegate understood the magnitude. This was not merely an Earth victory. It was a paradigm shift. Outside, the distant hum of warships faded, retreating into the void. Inside, a human and an apex predator stood together, side by side, resolute. Their bond, tested, proven, unbroken, was a declaration no council, no fleet, and no legend could ignore. The galaxy had witnessed the impossible. And the impossible had chosen Earth. Ryland exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what had been accomplished, yet aware that the story had only begun. Vorkal rumbled softly beside him, eyes gleaming with intelligence and trust. The apex's presence was no longer a threat. It was a promise. And for the first time, the galaxy would never underestimate humans again.